What is the excuse this time? That is not me asking that question, that is the internet, because when Alexander Zverev, a top 5 player in the world, walks into Acapulco and loses to the world number 84, the scoreboard is not the only thing that explodes. The comment section does too. Tonight we are breaking down what really happened, why fans are piling on Zverev in brutal fashion, and whether this loss says more about his mindset than his tennis. And trust me, there is a bigger issue building under the surface that could shape his entire season. Let us start with the shock. On paper, this was routine. Zverev had looked sharp earlier in the tournament. He talked about enjoying tennis more, about maturity, about balance in life. Then suddenly he is outbeaten by a player ranked outside the top 80. Upsets happen in tennis. That is part of the sport, but this one hit differently because of timing, because of expectations, and because of the noise that followed within minutes. Social media turned ruthless. Zverev continues to hand out top 5 wins like hotcakes. What will the excuse be this time? Will he blame Alcaraz and Sinner from home? Is it the balls again, the weather, something else? The reactions were sharp, sarcastic, and personal. Now let us slow this down. Is this fair criticism, or are fans crossing the line? Because there is a difference between holding a player accountable and simply attacking them. Zverev has always been a complicated figure in tennis. Incredible talent, massive serve, explosive backhand, Olympic gold medalist, but also inconsistent, sometimes dominant, sometimes fragile. And when you build that kind of reputation, every loss becomes amplified, especially when you are ranked inside the top 5. The phrase that kept repeating was simple: what is the excuse now? That sentence tells you everything about how fans currently see him. There is an expectation that there will be one. That perception did not appear overnight. Zverev has often explained losses in detail, sometimes talking about fatigue, conditions, scheduling, rhythm, and while explanations are normal in professional sport, fans sometimes interpret them as deflection, right or wrong. That is the image that has formed. So when he loses to the world number 84, patience disappears. But here is something important: losing to a lower-ranked player does not mean you are finished. It means you had a bad day. Tennis is brutal, that way margins are thin, confidence swings fast. One player plays free, the other tightens up. It happens. The real issue is not the loss, it is the narrative around it. And this is where things get interesting, because Zverev recently spoke about enjoying tennis more, about perspective, about getting older and valuing balance. Now, after this defeat, fans are questioning his seriousness. They are asking if he truly wants it, and that tension between enjoyment and urgency is where this story lives. Let me ask you something: do you believe Zverev struggles more with pressure or with consistency? Because those are two very different problems. Pressure means the moment overwhelms you. Consistency means your level fluctuates regardless of stakes. Against the world number 84, this did not look like a Grand Slam final. This was an early round match, so if pressure was lower, then inconsistency becomes the bigger concern. Top players separate themselves not by avoiding losses completely, but by minimizing them. Alcaraz rarely loses to players outside the top tier. Sinner does not give away matches easily. That is the standard. So when Zverev falls early, comparisons become unavoidable, and comparisons can be cruel. Fans immediately brought up Carlos Alcaraz. One comment said, "I am curious how he will blame Alcaraz for this one." Another asked if Alcaraz and Sinner were haunting him from home. That is sarcasm, but it shows something deeper. Rivalries shape perception. If you speak strongly about other top players, people watch closely when you stumble. Fair or unfair, that is how sports culture works. Now here is my honest take: Zverev does not need an excuse, he needs clarity. There is a big difference. Excuses create noise, clarity creates control. If he comes out and simply says, "I was not good enough today, credit to my opponent, I will improve," the conversation cools down. If he lists multiple factors, even valid ones, critics will twist it. Perception is powerful, and right now his perception is fragile. Another fan wrote, "Zverev is such an unserious player." That is harsh, but it reflects frustration. For years people have believed he has the tools to win a Grand Slam. Every season begins with expectation. Every early loss restarts the doubt. It is exhausting for fans, but imagine how exhausting it is for him. Professional tennis is not just physical, it is psychological warfare. You are battling opponents and public opinion at the same time. Social media magnifies everything. One bad match becomes a trending topic, one quote becomes a meme, and suddenly your identity feels questioned. This is the crossroads moment. Does he internalize the noise, or does he use it? Because criticism can destroy confidence, or it can ignite it. We have seen players respond to humiliation before. Sometimes being doubted publicly sharpens focus. If Zverev channels this anger correctly, Acapulco becomes fuel. If he does not, it becomes another scar, and scars accumulate. Let us talk about responsibility. It is fair to question performance. It is fair to expect more from a top 5 player. It is not fair to dehumanize. Calling someone a bum crosses into something unnecessary. Criticize the tennis debate, the mentality, but remember there is a person behind the ranking still. In elite sport, sympathy is limited, results define narrative, and right now the result is simple. World number 84 defeats Alexander Zverev. That headline alone creates pressure. Indian Wells is coming. The spotlight will be brighter. Every press conference question will feel heavier, and here is where we see growth or repetition, because growth is not about never losing, it is about responding differently each time. If he tightens up in the next event, the doubt spreads. If he comes out aggressive, composed, and sharp, this story flips quickly. Tennis memory is short. Win a big title next month, and nobody mentions Acapulco, but lose early again, and the pattern becomes narrative, and narrative sticks. So now I want to hear from you. Is Zverev still a genuine Grand Slam contender in your eyes, or has inconsistency capped his ceiling permanently? Be honest, because this debate is not about one match, it is about trajectory. Alexander Zverev stands at an interesting point in his career. He talks about perspective and longevity, but the tour is getting younger and hungrier. Alcaraz is fearless, Sinner is relentless. The margin for error is shrinking. That makes losses like this feel louder, but sometimes loud moments create clarity. Maybe this defeat forces a reset. Maybe it reminds him that reputation does not win matches, focus does. Maybe it pushes him to simplify, less explaining, more executing, less talking, more winning, because in the end, the only real response to criticism is performance. Nothing silences doubt like victory. Nothing ends excuse jokes like lifting trophies. So the next chapter matters more than this one. Acapulco 2026 might be remembered as a stumble or as a turning point. That depends entirely on what happens next, and that is why we watch, not just for the winners but for the reactions. This is Lareum, where we challenge the narrative and follow the emotion behind the game. The season is heating up, and so is the pressure. Stay with us.